welcome to another episode of Off the Ruck, your weekly rugby breakdown. And this review of the Waratahs versus the British and Irish Lions is coming to you from my walk with the dog, because today is an extremely busy day. Apologies for the disheveled look. It is just that there's so much rugby content to get through. I've got rugby articles coming out on RugbyPass about the game last night that I've needed to prepare one for the Wallabies versus the Flying Fijians, which is happening in just a mere couple of hours after this. So apologies for this rocky, bumpy review, but I'm going to give it to you really nice and quick because there's a lot of content to go up on TikTok, Instagram and YouTube, of course, as well as RugbyPass, where you can find my profile in the description below. So first, I just want to say it's a sunny day in New South Wales, and it is a sunny day because that was an absolutely tremendous effort by the Waratahs to keep the British and Irish Lions to their lowest aggregate score, or lowest score full stop, by 31 points, having scored 52 against the Queensland Reds and having scored 54 against the Western Force the week before, on tour at least. I know that they lost against Argentina, but nonetheless, this is against the Super Rugby Pacific sides I'm talking about. And that was just through pure grit and determination. Tough is something that the Waratahs have as a bit of a slogan throughout the years, whether it's rung true or not at different times. That's up to everyone's opinion, and I think it's pretty clear that sometimes it actually has not been how they've played. But nonetheless, the Waratahs were extremely impressive last night, particularly in defense. We saw that they continue to struggle with the same struggles that they had in Super Rugby Pacific in attack, where they couldn't quite get their structures sorted. They didn't really run a whole lot of patterns, but the individual talent of some players absolutely got them through most of the sticky parts of that game. So that's a tremendous congratulations to them. Now, for the British and Irish Lions, I wouldn't exactly say this is battle stations as it's DEFCON 1. It needs to be a stressful time. Of course, Andy Farrell and Captain Tyke Byrne they were disappointed in the post-match commentary and in their interviews, but of course they would be. Not thrashing one of these sides at Super Rugby Pacific level with the fewest amount of internationals is something that looks optically quite bad. But, you know, the thing that I would say is that they must be absolutely exhausted in camp. And I'm not talking about physically, because they're getting a good amount of rotation only. It must be mentally extremely exhausting for this group, having to travel, having to pack, having to play. And of course, that's what they signed up for. It's an absolute privilege, but you're not going to put a result like that purely just on them, you know, being all of a sudden a bad rugby team. So, you know, there were some poor performances, and we'll get into those in a second. We'll get into that for both sides. But realistically, that was just one of those games that you flush on tour. They got the win, move on, because I don't think they can learn a whole lot from it, apart from, and I will say this, the breakdown. They need to start figuring out how these Southern Hemisphere refs are going to be reffing the breakdown. Just like the Wallabies should be figuring out how the Northern Hemisphere are going to be reffing the breakdowns in the second two tests, because it's Piatti of Italy and McKellar of Georgia, which are reffing the two games. Thankfully, the Wallabies have had a little bit to do with them in the last 12, 13 months. So they will have game tape and they can go back and have questions to go to those referees. But Ben O'Keefe, who's refereeing the first test on July 19 against the Wallabies, who reffed the game the other night for the, I believe it was the Western Force game. Yeah, I think it was. That is a big task for them, because they are struggling to get any sort of pressure there, and they're only getting penalties awarded for them, and they're looking a little bit gun shy about going there, and that is such a big red flag. That is the only red flag really from last night, considering they picked such a dangerous pack that's full of really mobile, quick and breakdown threats in the back row particularly. So that was a big, that's one thing I'd be concerned about, and you definitely want to work on that as Andy Farrell and as a coach, because you want to be able to influence the game from the breakdown when you don't have the ball, and you want to be able to create pressure and get those penalties. So extremely important that they address that and they start having a look at that. Maybe some more conversations with the referees, I'm not sure. But overall, a pretty sloppy performance by them, by the Lions. That's poor handling. I'm unsure whether Finn Smith really made a good account of himself during that game, because you've got Finn Russell, and you know what? He's such a awesome player, with great ability to command the line and to be able to get the players and the team in the right positions. And Finn Smith was just struggling with a little bit of his decisive decision making last night. Marcus Smith came on late, but I don't think really you can put anything on his performance there, because the team was already kind of in a bit of a rut, and the Waratahs definitely had their tails well up by that point. So no direct influence on where Marcus Smith's form is, etc. But Finn Smith, I definitely think, took a step back last night, as did Hugo Keenan, unfortunately, with his first game back, and also Blair Kinghorn. Both those players struggled to really get involved, and Blair Kinghorn conceding a total of 6 turnovers. That's a lot, like a lot. And then also Hugo Keenan missing that key tackle on Darby Lancaster. That was a bad miss as well. It was kind of a standard tackle. It was just up front, just, steady as she goes tackle. So I'm gonna fix this hair right here. And then, come on, Tiger. Sorry, the dog wanted to go one way. And then Tyg Byrne, the captain, he's just not looking as fast and impactful as he normally is for Ireland, which he has done for so many years, and he is a crucial part of Andy Farrell's plans, but he just couldn't get that. He just hasn't been able to get his momentum or his influence on the game fully sorted, and it must be a worry for Andy Farrell now moving forward, because obviously he wants to be able to revert to an Irish core should things go west with a few of the combinations that he's trying out. But I just don't know if you can put Tyg Byrne in the starting side anymore, because there's other players that are performing, particularly in the second row, and I'm just unsure whether he's quick enough and mobile enough currently to be able to fit in the game mold that he has, because he has so many other mobile and quick back rowers. So that's a really big thought process for him to have. I thought for the Waratahs, Charlie Gamble, Jesus, what an absolute awesome effort by Charlie Gamble. The man can do literally everything, and he was an absolute pest at the breakdown, securing some penalties, some crucial ones when the Waratahs were heavily under pressure on their own line, or in their own 22 at least. And he tackled absolutely everything that moved. Obviously not as busy in attack, because he was in and around the breakdown and trying to secure breakdowns and whatnot and trying to turn it over. But what an absolute stellar performance from Charlie Gamble, the number 7. Now, it's the first number 7 that the Lions have actually versed that is like a proper number 7 and of high quality. And Joe Schmidt could do much worse than call upon his services should he need a 7 cover moving later into the year. Not during this Lions series, because I think Tizano and Fraser McWright definitely are those players there, but more so just as should injury strike. So I think him and Luke Reimer are worse replacements you could call in for number 7. So tremendous game by him. He's been good all year, to be frank. It's just he hasn't quite hit those levels, but that was one hell of a performance by him. And then I thought Hugh Sinclair, the captain, going out, the stalwart, calling time on his professional career, really, really impressive. Nonetheless, it was tough to watch at times, because they just looked like they defended for the full 80. Of course, they had stints where they did actually have the ball, but apart from some good counter-attack and some quick play, it was pretty tough watching, as it had been all season. And then I thought the front row got absolutely demolished. Taniela Tupou conceding 4 penalties. I thought he was kind of unlucky not to get at least 1 or 2 over Schoolman and Luke Cowan-Dickey, having actually been a little bit dominant in that situation, popping Schoolman and Luke Cowan-Dickey. Although Ben Darwin from Gainline Analytics, which is a friend of the pod, a friend of the channel, he, a former Wallaby and ACT Brumby, which I'm sure will be watching the game against the Brumbies on Wednesday, he said that as a tight head prop, you want to be popping the loose heads' hips, not their heads, which I thought was an interesting take, because I thought, the first person to stand up is their fault. But so we'll watch that. But I think Joe Schmidt, just like the benefits at number 7, which we've seen from Charlie Gamble, last night, we really saw Taniela Tupou, if he can correct that shape and really not angle his hips in and go in, then I think that he has the power and strength to really cause an upset there in the scrum. So that'll be really interesting. Nonetheless, it was a difficult watching him get penalised time upon time, and they were going backwards. And unfortunately, Tom Lambert didn't make a great account of himself at the scrum either. It was a tough watch as well. Not to mention when Jack Barrett and Daniel Botha came on against Ellis Genge and Tyke Furlong. I don't think their rep necessarily went up a lot, having scrummaging against, they predominantly played shoot shield rugby, so it's not really a fair battle there. But what a privilege and an honour for Botha and Jack Barrett to have played against the likes of Ellis Genge, Tyke Furlong, Dan Sheehan, who are absolute stellar internationals. I'll just take a little stop here to wrap this. So I think overall, really, really impressive effort by the Waratahs to send out Hugh Sinclair for his last professional game. I think overall, the Lions had a bad night at the office. Nothing to be overly worried about in terms of how it's going to look for the rest of the game. The Brumbies are going to be tougher, but I think that the Brumbies side is going to be the side that they're going to pick that is going to be as close to their test side as possible, because they won't necessarily want to play any other player closer to the first test in case they do get ahead, not going to have a 12-day mandatory stand down. So watch out for that Brumbies side. It's going to be a really tough side. It's the best Australian Super Rugby specific side by form, and that is by a big margin, a big margin. So that's going to be a hell cracker of a game. Any final thoughts on this game? I thought the Australian teams have continued to struggle to exit effectively and to actually be strategically smart when it comes to kicking the ball and to gain territory. The Lions are clearly just so good and so adept, and that's got to be thinking about the Northern Hemisphere influence on the game and at academy and junior levels. But then you also have to commend their ability to be calm under pressure, because they were suffering under a whole lot of pressure. I thought Hugh Jones and Sione Tuipulotu were a good mix in the centres without being absolutely amazing. I would actually say that that actually does more to hurt Sione Tuipulotu's credentials than it does to aid them. I think Hugh Jones is probably looking like a starter in that 13 jersey along Bundy Arki, but we'll get more into that as we progress. Do I think that there are any locked-in Lions? No, I'll wait until Brumbies time to call on that before the last two games. But honestly, there's more players in the Lions camp doing themselves disservices than there are players doing themselves any favours. So that'll be interesting to watch. Moving on, I think it's going to be clear that the Waratahs may end up actually being the side that does the best out of all these teams. So that's incredible. And well done to the Waratahs. I wouldn't be sounding any battle horns yet for the Lions. It'll be interesting to see who they pick on Wednesday. But overall, a really tremendously entertaining game from a thrill perspective. Was quite messy and a lot of drop ball and a lot of scrums which went backwards for the Waratahs. So overall, not incredibly exciting from a pure entertainment factor, but a lot of adrenaline. And I can imagine that there's a few heart medication tablets being taken in and around the Lions camp, because 2 tries, 1 converted, and the Waratahs would have won. Do they deserve to win? Probably not. Do they defend like absolute demons? Yes. So congratulations to the Waratahs on a solid effort. Now I'm going to head and submit this, hopefully before the Wallabies game, because we have that in just a mere couple of hours, and then I'll do a review on that game as well. So stay tuned and stay up to date on all the different channels, TikTok, Instagram, and of course here on YouTube. You can follow me at John B. Fergo on Twitter for my takes and views during the game. And then, of course, just make sure you hit that subscription button here on YouTube so that you stay informed with everything that I'm trying to get out. All right, guys, off to the next.